Let's talk about it. Dan and Blair are the most iconic couple of Gossip Girl and should have been Endgame, and I love talking about them. First of all, prior to Dan being a part of the group, he has never once thought about Blair. He has only looked up to Serena, worshipped Serena, has this massive crush on Serena, but has never really thought about Blair. It's almost like she didn't really matter. And then once he entered that world, he started to really loathe her. He even told his own father that she's everything he hates about the Upper East Side, which is so interesting when he's dating Serena, who's hiding a whole part of herself, but that's a whole other thing. Blair is always unapologetically herself. There we go. And then we get the first Dan and Blair moment that really solidified their relationship for me and the buildup of it all. When Serena takes over Blair's modeling shoot and Blair shows up there thinking that she's gonna sabotage it with Serena, has this confrontation that Serena knew that Blair wasn't there and calls her out on the fact that you knew I wasn't coming. Did you see my name on the door? Did you see anything? And she has this really raw and emotional moment. And the first person she sees after that blow up is Dan himself, where he sits down and gives her good advice. He can connect with her and he sees her on this level that he never saw her before. And you can see his gears changing a little bit because he's like, oh my gosh, she's a person like me. She doesn't have this glamorous life. She's suffering. And everything changes from there on out. Their friendship dynamic is so fun to watch. They literally went from enemies to friends to lovers, and it's my favorite love story. During my rewatch, it makes sense why they end up together. They have so much in common, and when they're together, they have such good banter. And even though they kind of have this like low-key loathing vibe, they also really enjoy each other's company and can relate to each other a lot. And I absolutely love that when they start hanging out during that winter break season, they both don't like the fact that they like hanging out with each other. Because prior to this, they never really did things one-on-one. Even though they had so much in common, they never cared to express those feelings and try to, push their friendship forward in a different way than it ever has been. And she's always been so in love with Chuck and involved in Chuck's life that he's never really cared to involve himself. But I absolutely love that they have such similar interests. They both end up working in W. They both love the same films. They both have this appreciation for culture, for art, and they can bond in such unique ways that him and Serena cannot. Blair is educated just like he is. They both are very driven individuals, and you see that when they're both in high school as well. She's a straight A student. She's always striving to make a name for herself. She does not want to live under her mother's shadow. She may use some connections sometimes, but Blair really tries to do everything on her own. She doesn't want things given to her, similar to how Serena has had everything given to her. And that's something that Dan can appreciate because he does not like the fact that Serena just gets everything handed to her on a silver platter. He hates when Nate gets things just handed to him. And he actually respects Blair when he learns that she doesn't want things handed to her like her other colleagues do. When they finally get together, she is so happy, guys. That is the happiest you ever see Blair in the entire show. Why? Because she has a genuine smile every single moment she has with Dan Humphrey on screen. Every single moment. She's smiling, she's giggly, she's giddy. He is just so in love with her. He is staring at her with this admiration, and we only get it for a few episodes, but she is so genuinely happy. One of my favorite Dan and Blair scenes is after the elevator, and then they go out drinking to bars, and they're in some random alleyway, and they go and hook up behind this gate. But she's just laughing, giggling, and just having a great time, and so is he, and they're just so sweet together. Also, by the time that he falls in love with Blair, he knows her fully. She's not hiding anything from him. She has always been herself, and he's always seen all of who she is. He fell in love with her for her, not with the idea of her. And she also fell in love with him. And they just knew each other so well. They were not toxic. They were incredibly healthy. They supported each other in everything. When he was ready to take that internship in Rome, she was ready to go with him. And I fully think that if Chuck would have never gotten involved, she would have gone. And I think I would have loved to see a Blair and Dan summer in Rome. But this act of love that he did to make her feel like a princess one more time is still one of my favorite scenes ever. I know that her and Chuck have this strong, crazy, toxic love. This was genuine. This was so passionate. And this was just so a warm hug. I saw someone say on TikTok that they're a very rom-com relationship, and absolutely. Of course, the writers had to break them up to ultimately bring Chuck and Blair together. But it was so infuriating because Dan was in love with her already for so long. And then she finally admits her feelings to this. They get together and then they break up just after 4 episodes of being together. If you rewatch those 4 episodes, look at her the whole time. She is nonstop smiling. She is so happy with this man. And he is so happy with her. And not once does he miss Serena when he's with Blair. If Blair would have never chosen Chuck, they would have been endgame. And I truly think that people would have been more on board if Chuck would have stopped trying to pursue Blair. And I absolutely loved when he was trying to sabotage Dan, and Dan confronts Chuck and he's like, "You're only doing this because you know I have a chance." Even Chuck knew there was something there. She called Dan to go and rescue her the night after her wedding because she knew that he was going to be her comfort. Oh my God. She couldn't lean on Chuck like this like she does with Dan. Even though she knew that Chuck was the love of her life and that Chuck loved her, she called Dan. And even Serena and Chuck were shocked by this. Anyways, I urge you to go rewatch the episodes that they're actually full on dating, and you will see that she is the most genuine, the happiest, and just the most lovesick when she's with Dan. If you compare it to when she's with Chuck, yes, there is a lot of passion between them, but it's also very toxic. To be honest, the day that Chuck hurt her when he punched that glass, I felt like was really unforgivable, and I was really surprised that she ever went back to him after that moment. Let's also not forget that Dan was ready to raise another man's child. He didn't care. Anyways, that's why I ship them so much more, because they were always so upfront with who they were. They had so much more in common than him and Serena. They could bond over the trauma that they had, and they just genuinely loved each other so much. Actually, let me backtrack. Blair never said she loved him, but I have a feeling that she did. Only because when all of that happened with Serena and the video finally came out, which Serena's the worst. Anyways, when all of that finally came out, Serena goes, "I only did that because I thought you didn't love Dan." And she doesn't say she didn't or she did. So we really don't know if she loved Dan or not. In my headcanon, I think she did, but she was just so hesitant to letting Chuck go, because when she finally, if she would have said those words to Dan, she would have had to let Chuck go. And I don't think she wanted to, which is why she never did. But I think she felt those feelings towards Dan 100%. And she was just so soft with him. She was so sweet. They were so fun to watch on screen. I shipped them when I first watched the show. I ship them even harder now because they made more sense. If they would have had more seasons of the show, I think they would have been endgame. Also, let's not forget the fact that when she finally went back to Chuck, she had to wear her engagement ring around her neck because he had to defeat his father before he could invest himself into her. And Dan confronts her and says, "You had a man who loved you wholeheartedly, and you chose someone who is gonna wait until they're ready for you?" He knew that Blair deserved better, but she was stuck in the toxicity and she just couldn't get over it. I think if it would have been a situation where Chuck left somewhere and they had a lot more alone time together, I think that they could have been endgame and they could have just dedicated time to their relationship and not have other people in the way, aka Chuck Bass, because Serena was never an obstacle. Once he was into Blair, that's it. Serena was never even a thought in his mind. And it would have made more sense because then Lily and Rufus could have stayed together. Just saying. I will forever ship them. Where are my other Dan and Blair stands? Because they're amazing.